Welcome back, my dear listeners. This is a new episode of the History of the American Mafia, a podcast written by Fabio Fabiano, translated and read by Grace Carlisi. I do hope you enjoy today's new episode. Frankie Carbo. During the various episodes of this podcast, I have already mentioned how the American Mafia was involved in almost all areas of daily life: financial, trade unions, politics, and the world of gambling, legal and illegal activities. So it's not particularly strange that the boxing world housed its interest too. Since the 1920s, Irish, Jewish, and Italian gangsters organized boxing matches and became the boxers' managers. The Mafia was particularly interested in professional boxing matches. For over 20 years, this sport was controlled by a powerful member of the Italian-American Mafia, Paolo Giovanni Carbone, known as Frankie Carbo, a member of the Lucchese family from New York. Paolo Giovanni Carbone was born in August the 10th precisely in 1904 in New York on the Lower East Side. His parents had emigrated from Agrigento in Sicily. His criminal career was similar to that of many other members of the Italian-American Mafia. At 11, he was incarcerated in a New York reformatory for young delinquents. Over the next 10 years, Carbo was in and out of prison, accused of various crimes such as assault, theft, and robberies. At the age of 20, he killed a taxi driver over a futile argument during a game of snooker. He went on the run for 4 years. When he turned himself in, the witnesses had disappeared, and so he was only accused of alleged murder. He was sentenced to 4 years, but released from prison after only 20 months. During the Prohibition era, Carbo, who was nicknamed the Grey because of his grey hair, became the man of honor of the Galliano family, what we know as today as the Lucchese family, with the role of soldier. He was also one of the most ruthless killers of Murder Incorporated. Although he was investigated 17 times for some very serious crimes, including 5 murders, he never ended up in prison. In 1931, as a favor to the Philadelphia family, he was commissioned to murder Mickey Duffy, a rival Irish gangster. In 1939, Carbo was commissioned to assassinate Harry Big Greeny Berg, a gangster who was about to spill the beans on the mafia activity to the police. 2 Californian bosses had decided to kill him, and the chosen executors were Frankie Carbo and Bugsy Siegel. Not surprisingly, an Italian-American and a Jew. The 2 killers, Carbo and Siegel, went to California and did a clean job, as they say in their jargon. Bugsy drove while Carbo fired the 5 shots that killed Big Greeny. For this murder, the ex-Jewish killer of Murder Inc., A.B. Reels, agreed to testify against Carbo and the leaders of Murder Incorporated. I already told you in a previous podcast what had happened before the start of the trial. Reels fell from the 5th floor window of a hotel in Coney Island, where he had been protected by the police. The case was dismissed as suicide, and so the charges against Frank Carbo and his accomplices were dropped. In 1947, Bugsy Siegel was murdered in his Beverly Hills mansion in Los Angeles. Carbo was suspected of this murder too. In the 1940s, Carbo became the agent of the best boxers and the organizer of important boxing matches on behalf of the American Cosa Nostra. The world of boxing in the United States was corrupted by Carbo and his acolytes. Hundreds of matches were fixed, and legal and illegal bets were controlled. Carbo didn't limit himself to merely controlling a boxing champion, but in only a short while he became the puppeteer who pulled the strings in the middleweight category, only to advance in other categories soon later. In middleweight, he had full power over the boxers and all the fights that took place. Any challenger who wanted to face the reigning champion had to sign a contract with Carbo. World champions such as Jake LaMotta and Sonny Liston also ended up under Carbo's control. Carbo's ace in the hole was a solid friendship with Jim Norris, a multi-millionaire. His family managed the Chicago grain market and was the director of Madison Square Garden, the most famous sports facility in Manhattan. He was also owner of 2 professional hockey teams. He managed the Chicago Stadium and was the largest shareholder in railroads in the West. Carbo and Norris had always been friends because Norris had had very close relationships with the underworld, including the feared one in Chicago. The Norris-Carbo duo ruled the world of the ring in the pre-war and early post-war years. It's easy to see how, thanks to their cooperation, controlling the boxing world was a piece of cake. It was a partnership of interests. Norris owned the stadiums and televisions, and Carbo had the boxers in his hands. In the 1960s, it all ended for Carbo. After Norris's death, there was a senatorial commission chaired by Senator Kefauver, which put the world of the mafia in crisis for a certain period. Furthermore, times had changed, and television overturned the old mechanisms that governed the world of boxing. In fact, it was the television audience that decided which boxers they liked, and this determined the greatest revenue for those who organized a match. For the mafia found itself ousted practically overnight. In reality, other paths had already been chosen, produced much more money than boxing and its related illegal activities could ever have done. From Carbo's own words, "Today, boxing is an irrelevant source of wealth if you compare it with the drug and weapons market." From a judicial point of view, Carbo's parable began to decline in 1961. He was arrested together with his collaborator and accomplice Frank Palermo. The testimony of the former boxer and boxing organizer Jack Leonard, who had had the courage to report their criminal activities, had been decisive. The trial caused quite a stir. The prosecution was supported by Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Carbo and Palermo were found guilty of extortion and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Despite his imprisonment, Carbo continued to exert his influence in the boxing world. With a company that referred to him in 1964 and 1965, he managed the 2 controversial matches for the world heavyweight title between Sonny Liston and Cassius Clay, alias Muhammad Ali. Carbo served his sentence at Marion Federal Prison in the state of Illinois. Released from prison for health reasons, Paolo Giovanni Carbone died in Miami Beach, Florida, on the 9th of November 1976.